So now we're getting ready to move to the second part of the presentation. And what we're trying to do here, because this is YouTube, is make relatively short, easily accessible videos so that you're not sitting there watching a really long video. So now we're getting to the part two. So part two is how do we get into this four-step process? Let's go to the next slide. So the first thing that you need to do, and this is what I tell everyone to do, is identify your first degree network. And you need to, and an easy way, by the way, to do that is make a list of all of your networks that you're a part of. And usually, and just write them down on a piece of paper. Usually when I tell students this, they look at me like I'm crazy and they say, what do you mean? I'm a law student. I'm not part of any fancy networks. Well, actually you are. Everyone is part of many networks, but a law student especially, what are the obvious networks? Well, where that person went to college, where that person went to law school, is even the law school you're currently in, where you might have other networks, and we're going to illustrate this through some other slides with Lydia. But the first step is identify and move everyone into your LinkedIn network. Update your LinkedIn profile. We're going to talk about that. Step 3 is conduct what I call a second degree analysis to identify the top 10 people. We're going to show exactly how Lydia did that through multiple searches. And then finally, connect online and offline. This is a really important step because a lot of times people think that all they need to do is get on LinkedIn and the universe will rain down opportunity on you, and that is not how it works. You actually have to have a strategy on how to use the data that you are able to access and get from LinkedIn. It doesn't just happen because you're now connected to somebody online through social media. This is also a good point I want to make because a lot of lawyers are going to be watching this. And lawyers, too, are horrible at this. They think that all they need to do is connect to somebody, but it's the successful, natural networkers who are able to really take this to the next level because they're combining the power of LinkedIn with a process of networking that has been around since the beginning of time. So once you've connected to someone on LinkedIn, you've built that relationship. In my 4-step process is connect online and offline, because it's not enough to just connect online these days, even though that's what many students and lawyers for that matter think, that all you have to do is connect on LinkedIn and opportunity falls on your lap. That's not how the world works. You actually have to have a strategy for what you're going to do with a connection after you've made that person a connection online. Then the hard work comes, which is you have to build a relationship with that person.
I want to ask you a question, Doug, because Sure. I think a lot of law students, and probably everyone, is confused about when to connect with someone, when to bring someone into one's first degree network. Is it appropriate to reach out after a networking event, after a coffee? What do you recommend?
My advice, and this advice is based on the premise that, the most important thing in terms of building your LinkedIn network and your contacts is quality over quantity. It's better to have a smaller group of people you trust in your network than to just connect to every single person. I also don't think that it really works to connect with people, especially if they're much more senior than you are, if you don't have some foundation for the relationship with them. So, for example, oftentimes I go to conferences and I'm immediately, somebody shakes my hand and they immediately give me their business card, and that's immediately followed by a LinkedIn connection, and I don't even know who they are. So if it was a student and they were connecting with me and they wanted to be connected to me, I would try to create an underlying premise for that relationship first. Even if it is, hey, Doug, in an email sent, or if you can't do an email and you really want to connect, do a connection with an in-mail in it, which LinkedIn lets you do, where it says, Doug, I saw you at this conference. I really enjoyed my conversation with you. It was great talking to you at that point. I'd love to connect online. And it would be great to reconnect with coffee in San Francisco at some point at your convenience. Something like that. But again, it's better to have an underlying basis for the connection if you can. And if you're one of these people out there that finds yourself with 5,000 connections, and you're wondering, do I have too many connections? Do this test where you ask yourself, or just choose somebody at random and say, could I reach out to this person with a favor or a question? And if you don't know who they are, or you don't feel comfortable going to them, they shouldn't be in your network. Great. So let's talk about Lydia. So the first step, now we're walking through our first of 4 steps in the 4-step process. And the first step is, in addition to kind of identifying who is in your first degree network, you need to fix your profile. And this is a great example of Lydia, because here her profile's really bare bones. I mean, she has a great picture, but her headline, and that's what this is right now, which is, I think, is one of the most important things in your LinkedIn profile. It's short and sweet and is really a description of you, and it's what's going to come up in addition to your name when a search is done. So a question here is, does this accurately reflect the brand that you want to create? And I've worked with a lot of lawyers just as a favor to create that headline. What is the most common headline for a partner at a law firm? It's so-and-so partner at this law firm, which is a horrible headline. Everybody knows that you're a partner at the law firm. And when you scroll down in your LinkedIn profile, you're going to see under your first experience that you're a partner in that law firm. A much better description for a headline would be, what do you really do? What is your expertise? Are you a counselor to senior executives? Are you an M&A expert? Are you I think a friend of mine on LinkedIn, Wendy Moore, who I've worked with recently, her headline, she's a benefits lawyer at Perkins Coie. Her headline is 409 is my jam. That's a great headline for a benefits lawyer. Lydia says legal intern at Accelerate Legal, but I think we could do better. She also has no summary. If you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, there's a space between your experience and your headline that you can write. I recommend that you do that in the first person and provide a nice description of what you're doing now and what you want to be doing if you are looking for a job. And let's go to the next slide. This is my friend Rob. Rob is a senior executive at FedEx, and he is, in fact, the global compliance officer. And we don't have time in this presentation to look at his new headline, which I did not incorporate into this talk, but Rob's LinkedIn profile now is beautiful because it goes through in rich detail a summary in the first person, and then an explanation of all of his jobs at FedEx and so forth, as he positions himself for the next evolution of his career track, which really is, okay, I've been a senior exec at a company, now I want to be on boards. So how do I let the world know that my real expertise as a board member is going to be as an advisor and counselor and expert in my given area? If you look at Rob's profile, you'll see how we changed that up. Next slide. So what do we do with Lydia as we got into this prep for the process that we're trying to work on together? Well, we did a lot of homework. So leading up to the talk, first, as I mentioned earlier today, we had her identify her networks. We had her, we met in person and we worked on her brand. We really thought about what does she want to illustrate to the world in terms of her focus as a law student. And then we had her refine her headline, write her summary in the first person, conduct her second degree analysis that we'll get to later in the talk. And we ran searches together. And then we actually had her reach out to those people. So it was pretty comprehensive. And if you're sitting at home saying, as so many people have said to me all over the world, I don't know how to get started with this LinkedIn thing, this is how you get started. Next slide. So step one, so identify all of your networks, classify the contacts into networks, which we talked about, analyze your social graph. And I wanted to make it very easy for Lydia. I said, just identify the top 25 people in each network. If you can't do that, don't worry. Identify the top 10 people in your network. It will still have monumental impact, or I should use the word exponential impact, because remember, every person that you list is even if every person is just connected to 10 additional people, but the average person now, with the pervasiveness of LinkedIn, has hundreds of connections. The exponential impact is huge. So if you're connected to 10 people, they're connected to 10 people. You can see how the power is vast. Next. So Lydias Networks, I mentioned earlier that law students often say to me, well, I'm not part of any network. And I said, well, everybody's part of your law school network where you went to college. But Lydia identified some incredibly powerful networks. Where she went to high school, North Andover High School, a prestigious school. I actually count my high school as a very powerful network to this day. Where she went to college. Within college, Lydia broke out a number of networks within her college. She's very active with a girls' center. She's active with her study abroad program to this day with the people she met there. She also did something called a peer health exchange. Then at Hastings, it's not just that she's part of Hastings Law School. She's part of the Business Law Journal. She's part of a tech group there. She's part of a human rights group there. Each one of those groups has different types of people. And even though Lydia doesn't realize it now, and I certainly didn't realize it as a 25-year-old law student, each one of those groups of people will go on to become very, very important, powerful members of her own network, right? I mean, I bet in 20 years, some of Lydia's best friends in each of these areas, assuming Lydia decided to be a partner at the law firm she's going to be a summer associate at or some other law firm, I bet each one of these networks is going to have people who are now at companies in charge of their legal function. Her parents' network, one of her most powerful networks, not just her parents' network, but I think the network where her brother went to school is a powerful network for her. And her soccer team. Lydia is very active in a women's soccer team, and those connections, you might be thinking, well, why is that an important network? Well, those are very deep connections that she'll have. Hopefully for a very, very long time, fostered through competition in sport. Next. This is the network of a woman named Katrina Kaufman when I could still generate these LinkedIn networks. This is going back to my Columbia Law School presentation. And Katrina was one of the two students I worked with. And I'm showing this graphical representation of her network because it's so different and interesting from a typical law student. Remember, I had asked Petal at Hastings, at Columbia, to get me a typical law student and a non-typical. Katrina's the non-typical. She has a degree from Northwestern in communications, and she wanted to go into filmmaking. So if you look at her two biggest networks, it's Columbia Journalism School, and I'm sorry, Columbia, not Northwestern, Columbia Journalism School, and over here, she was in film production on the movie Avatar, which probably at the time she was making that movie and meeting all of these people, she was thinking, it's just a job. But Avatar went on to become a hugely successful movie, and I bet each one of those connections is an influential person in that area. Next slide. Step 2, we're now on the second step. Update your LinkedIn profile to accurately reflect your professional brand. And this, again, is what we did with Lydia, where we spent a lot of time thinking about her headline and writing out her summary. Next step. So this was what her headline was, legal intern at Accelerate Legal. Next slide. And as you can see from here, she didn't this was before we did work on her profile, and her profile didn't have any explanations. And I want to say one other thing about why explanations are so important. When I'm talking about this, I often think back to my time at LinkedIn in 2007 and 2008, when my very good friend DJ Patel was the chief data scientist at that time. And they would joke that LinkedIn's data group had, I think they had like a rocket scientist and I don't remember if it was a brain surgeon or some other incredibly, very difficult career type that you have to be I think there was a physicist. There was a physicist and a rocket scientist. And you're like, why are these incredibly smart people working in tech companies in data science? This was the first time I ever met a data scientist. And these people are using their expertise to figure out how to best leverage your profile online. And they've built a very, very sophisticated search engine so that when you fill out your profile and you populate it with a lot of information, that's picked up in Google, and that becomes very valuable. So if somebody was looking for something with Lydia's expertise, assuming she was a practicing lawyer, that's why you would want to fill out your profile with words that explain what you do. Next step. Now you can see what her profile looks like after she spent the time to really build it out. Look at her headline, law student focused on corporate law and venture. It sounds so simple, but it's incredibly descriptive of exactly what she wants to do as after law school. And it's much more descriptive than what her headline was before, which was legal intern. Next, you can see below here, we don't have time to read it, but you can obviously go to her profile on LinkedIn if you're at home. And she's written out in the first person what her profile is about. Next step. And here she's built out what she did under each area. Next slide. So step 3, we're almost to step 4. Step 3 is conduct your second degree analysis to identify key people. And what I mean by second degree analysis is here you're going in and you're using the power of LinkedIn search, which is awesome. And I'm going to show you how at the end of this presentation in real time using my computer. I'm going to have Anna Brooke hand me over my own computer and I will do a search through my own network. But this is a way to find people on LinkedIn who have elements that are in common with you. And that is incredibly powerful. Oftentimes, I counsel law students and new lawyers as they're trying to figure out, gee, I really want someday to be a partner at this law firm. I have no idea how to go about it, and I have no idea how to get a mentor. How do I find a mentor? And Anna Brooke and I talked about this recently on some videos that are actually on my YouTube channel, specifically under the mentorship playlist. And one of the things I recommend is to do a search and find everybody in San Francisco who went to the same law school you did and the same college you did and is in the same city that you are now. And then you can reach out to them and you can say, we both have the same pedigree. I'm so impressed with what you're doing. I'm not trying to get a job from you. I'd like to just have an informational interview, and can I take you out to coffee and learn about how you made your way from Washington University and Tulane, my two schools, to get to where you are now. And I can tell you this, that if somebody reached out to me with that email and said, Doug, I went to the same college you did, the same law school, be a stand-up guy and meet with me for coffee, I can tell you I absolutely would meet for coffee, and so would all of my friends under the same circumstance. And if you can dig even deeper, if you can find something else that you have in common, like I was on the Jessup Moot Court team at Tulane, where I competed against other schools. And I went through hell preparing for that competition. But that has caused me to feel fierce loyalty to other students who have gone through the same thing. If somebody reached out to me and said, Doug, I also was a Jessup competitor. Would you meet with me and talk to me about your career path? Of course. So that's what this is about.